Well, growing up, I was not a good test taker. I have vivid memories of preparing for an upcoming test, studying, reviewing, feeling like I was ready. And when the day of the test finally came, I would start off great. I was focused, I knew the material, I was working my way through the questions until the first kid in class got up and turned in their completed test. And suddenly the internal dialogue would begin. How can they be done that fast? Am I taking too much time on this? What if I'm the last one done? Does that make me look like I wasn't prepared? And then I would start looking around the room trying to figure out where everyone else was on the test. Who was almost finished? Who was still working? Who had already turned theirs in? And it would just spiral from there. The strange thing is, I could have been completely prepared. I could have known the material like the back of my hand, and I could have been doing just fine. But the moment I took my eyes off of my own test and I started paying attention to everyone else, my fears would set in. After years of this, I was finally evaluated, and they could see where on the test a person would turn theirs in, and that's where it would shift. My writing would change, my answers would be off. Every test. It was amazing. It became very clear on every test as soon as the first student turned their test. So I was claimed to have test anxiety. So I got the accommodations to take a test in another room all the way through college, actually. And it worked. Thank the Lord. Most of us know what it's like to take a test. Maybe it was a test in school or your driver's test. Or maybe the test looks like a diagnosis, or a job loss, or the death of someone you love, or a strained relationship, or uncertainty about the future. Tests don't just come on paper. Tests come in many forms. And they often reveal far more than what we know. They reveal where we place our trust. Preacher Zinnia Jekyll wrote in her commentary on Working Preacher on this text, Jesus has finished feeding the 5,000. He dismisses the crowd and tells the disciples to get into the boat and go on ahead. What's interesting is that Jesus is quite bossy. The Greek word is actually compel. So our translation softens it to say, made the disciples get into the boat. But this wasn't a suggestion or an invitation. Jesus gave them no choice. He put them in that boat the way a teacher places a test on your desk. You didn't ask for it. You may not be ready for it, but here it is, and you're going to take it. The announcement of a test often opens us to a deeper kind of learning, I think. It's what makes us go back to what we skipped, wrestle with what we avoided, and discover what we thought we already understood. In our gospel story this week, the story might appear to reinforce a fear not version of the text. See, when Peter exercises bold, fearless faith in Jesus, he can do the impossible. His faith empowers him to walk on water just like Jesus. But as soon as Peter gives in to fear, he nearly drowns. Now, for me, I don't always agree with this reading. If I'm being honest, I think this reading can be a bit dangerous, if you will. Nowhere in the Gospels are we called to prove our faith or test God's character by taking pointless risks that could threaten our lives. Nowhere in the Gospels does Jesus teach us that bad things happen to us because we're too chicken to earn God's protective care. Whether we're talking about respecting the power of the sea during a bad storm or paying attention to expert medical advice, the same caution applies. Notice the timeline of events in this story. When the disciples see Jesus walking on the water, they're terrified. They don't recognize him. They think they've seen a ghost. Naturally, they cry out in fear. And at that instant, Jesus offers them comfort and reassurance. Okay, great. He tells them exactly who he is. Take courage. It's I. Don't be afraid. We don't know if the silent 11 take Jesus at his word. But we do know for sure that Peter does not. He sets Jesus an identity test. Lord, if it's you, what's at play is how we respond to God's presence when we are afraid. What we say and think and feel and do when the divine comes to us in ways that we don't always recognize. The disciples, they're not wrong for being afraid. Of course they're afraid. They're afraid because they're not really keen on drowning, right? So if we extend the meaning of drowning to include all the ways in which we human beings find ourselves in over our heads in this world, then of course we experience fear. If you haven't, come talk to me. Of course, we feel afraid when sick children or unfriendly neighbors or grinding jobs and financial uncertainty comes in and threatens aspects of our lives. Of course, we feel afraid when our basic biology betrays us into anxiety and panic or depression. The issue is not fear. The issue is where fear leads. Notice the first place that Peter's fear leads him. He has every right to be afraid when his boat pinches in the dark sea, feeling scared in the face of danger. That's not the problem. The problem is that his fear leads him straight to suspicion and distrust. His fear leads him to test and question Jesus' identity instead of taking Jesus' self-disclosure at face value. If it's you, enable me to do the impossible. If it's you, reorder reality and prove to me that you're God. Like Peter, I fail to recognize Jesus when the going gets rough. When I face fearsome circumstances, my go-to position, it's not trust. It's suspicion. Suspicion in a doctor, suspicion in myself to be capable of completing the task. In my fear, I forget that my relationship with God is multifaceted and complex, and I reduce it to something transactional. Okay, Jesus, prove to me that you care about me. I'll do A, and then you'd better do B in return, okay? Anybody have those negotiating conversations with God? Interestingly, Peter's test fails. Oh, no. Despite his initial boldness, he is not able to prove who Jesus is by walking on water. And why? Because Jesus doesn't calm the sea for Peter's convenience. Even though Peter steps out of the boat, his circumstances remain wild and turbulent. If Peter thinks he can manipulate Jesus into making faith easy, he learns otherwise real fast. To truly trust Jesus is to hold two pictures of God's kingdom in tension. Yes, sometimes Jesus demonstrates his power in beautiful and miraculous ways. At other times, though, we need to trust that his incarnation, his quiet, abiding presence in our wild, untamed lives, is sufficient for the circumstances we face. Easier said than done, I know. Sometimes Jesus' power is paradoxical. It comes to us in what looks like vulnerability or like weakness or like strangeness. Once Peter is safe on the boat, Jesus asks him the question he can't answer. You have little faith. Why did you doubt? I wonder if Jesus asked this question not because Peter gives way to panic and nearly drowns, but because his doubt compels him to make a foolish request in the first place. I wonder if Jesus' question means something like, Peter, as soon as you saw me, and I told you who I was, and you heard my voice, I spoke words of assurance and comfort to you, why didn't you believe me? Maybe when Jesus asks us why we doubt, what he's really asking us is, why do you doubt me? Why do you not trust that I'll be honest with you? Why do you doubt that I am with you, for you, in you, around you? After all this time, why do you still feel a need to test me? In my mind, the power of the gospel story doesn't lie in Peter's faith or doubt, courage or fear. Jesus' trajectory at this point is the point, because unlike Peter's, it never changes. It's constant and it's focused and it's relentless. From the very beginning of the story, Jesus moves towards his disciples. He moves towards them when they're struggling at sea. He moves towards them when they decide he's a menacing ghost. He moves towards them when they are terrified by his approach. He still moves towards them when they begin to drown. He moves towards them when they ask for help. He moves towards them when they are shivering and sorry. He moves towards them when they realize, for a beautiful flickering instant, who he is and what he is. He moves towards them when they worship him. In other words, Jesus never stops moving towards the ones he loves. He never stops crossing the dark water to come to wherever we are. Neither our fearlessness nor our faithlessness ever alters his steady approach. We are the ones he is bound for. Our flailing bodies are the ones he pulls out of the water. Ours is the boat he climbs into. It is for us that he calls out across the terrifying waves again and again and again. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Amen.